Thank you very much, Michael. Hello, my name is Charles Lincoln, and following up on the domestic legal environment and regulation, the domestic regulation must be in harmony with the international treaties the U.S. has signed on to. Indeed, can often be a complicated process as the domestic legislation and regulation is a little less than 2,000 words. But to make sense of it, essentially, the Buy American Act came about in 1933, outlining domestic preference rules for the government procurement. And as we heard, it's been amended several times since then. Then in 1948, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the GATT agreement, came into effect that allows only for domestic preference for government procurement and prohibits it in the private sector. In 1993, NAFTA came around, and one of the provisions in NAFTA is that it requires the federal government and contractors to consider Mexican and Canadian manufacturers as being domestic manufacturers for government procurement, as long as those contracts are over, over a certain minimum, over a certain minimum threshold. So this leads us to the question, interestingly, 129 countries share the unique advantages of the NAFTA agreement, and they've entered into similar agreements with the United States that allow these other countries to be considered as domestic manufacturers for government procurement purposes in the U.S. as long as those manufacturers in other countries meet certain minimum thresholds for government contracts. So the question becomes, which of these major countries with major manufacturing capabilities are not considered as domestic manufacturers under the Buy American provisions? Well, as you can see on this map, it is essentially the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia, China, as well as Egypt and South Africa. So when we're looking at the policy options, we essentially have three options. Keep the status quo, keep the Buy American Act as it is, completely eliminate it, which is possibly politically infeasible, or suggest that what we suggest is to keep only the essential elements, specifically the limited items that are important for security as outlined in the Berry Amendment. So our recommendations are: get rid of the aspects that make the Buy American Act a disadvantage, all the disadvantages, and keep the advantages of the Buy American Act by finding better ways to achieve these positive aspects, while also considering whether NASCO and other interested entities should really try to fix the Buy American Act specifically for Mexico and Canada, or try to expand it to countries that are not considered as domestic manufacturers. However, if NASCO or similar entities would want to focus on figuring out ways to increase trade with Mexico and Canada, one potential aspect could be to reduce the minimum threshold of government contracts so as to allow for smaller businesses to enter the market. Thank you very much for your time. Do you have any questions or comments?